Hello everyone, I am Ishan, and today we are going to talk about the brief history of periodic table. First of all, let us talk about the history of periodic table of the elements, one of the most iconic images in all of science. Our story begins with Thales. Thales was a Greek philosopher, and he proposed that all matter in the universe is made up of just one type of substance, that is water. A question raised in this theory: if all things and material are water, then how do we explain the other diverse material around us? Can they made up of just one single substance? Now Thales attempted to explain this by suggesting that the water can take the various states such as botanical, physiological, meteorological and geological water. These states we claimed in combination of one another. And in this how we got our answer that how do we have such a diverse material in the universe around us. But the Thales idea lost popularity after the centuries when Greek philosopher Empedocles postulated. He said that there are four basic substances including water but also air, earth and fire. He proposed that these four fundamentals combined various ratios and formed all material around us. And just as these substances themselves are mixed in other material, so their properties partially retained by new material that they comprised. Plato was the first man who used the special term, that is elements, for these substances around us. Now let us talk about the another great personality, that is Aristotle. Aristotle when attempted to make a sense of these elements and their properties by describing what he thought. He placed them on the basis of their properties. He told that water is cold and wet, air is hot and wet, earth is cold and dry, fire is hot and dry. So Aristotle's system gives us the way to catalog these elements. Elements is something more than the simple list. He went beyond that by plotting these properties on two coordinates, one axis of hot and cold and another for wet and dry. In doing this, he created a now famous table of elements that is understood them if which the elements with simpler properties forms the same column of the table. For example, the wet element share the column and the hot columns share the row. This format was an old format in which elements were placed on the basis of their properties, and we will soon see how it is relevant to the modern periodic table. But for that, we are going to jump ahead nearly 2000 years just at the time of industrial revolution. It's the French scholar Antoine Lavoisier who is generally credited for discovering the similar first correctly identified elements. He decided to challenge the two old idea that water, earth, fire and air are elements. And here's how he did it. The first that he did was to acknowledge that if the substance can be broken down into simpler substance, then this original substance cannot be an element. So if a material can be decomposed, it's not an element. He used this idea to test the 2000-year-old periodic table that water is an element. Actually, to don't know about H2O was an element, but he know was that he can break it down into gas by passing it, and the gas that he collected can be burnt in air, which continued oxygen to recover the water. But what he could not do was to further decompose that hydrogen and oxygen. To decompose that he collected so by chemically disassembling and reassembling water. So he proved it that water is not as element. And by filling to decompose the oxygen and hydrogen he created, he was also able to correctly identify those material as elements. He also reasoned if a substance can be physically separated into two or more material, it's not an element. He used his idea to put yet another classical element to the test, this time air. He was able to physically separate O2 and N2 by this best attempts is to separate those into other materials failed. So he proved that water and air are not elements, but the hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen are. Lavoisier in his contemporary continued his vein and able to correctly identify catalog approximately 2 dozen elements before his death. But just like Aristotle, modern chemists don't put this element simply as a list. Instead, they organize them specially based on certain properties. And let's see how this practice started. For that, we need to jump ahead few generations. The genesis of modern periodic table took place in the brain of Russian chemist by the name Dmitry Mendeleev. What Mendeleev noted was that he took some elements and placed them in increasing order by their atomic masses. He noticed that every in this list the property of element seems to be repeating. For example, lithium and sodium have the similar kind of properties. Beryllium and magnesium also have same properties. Boron and aluminium too. Carbon and silicon and so on. And this trend continued among most of the elements. So Mendeleev decided not to show aluminium in a list, but instead to break the list just like a line of text in the paragraph. He placed elements within the similar properties in a column. Using this technique, Mendeleev was able not only to make a compact reach table of the element, but one which he could able to use to predict the existence of elements which were yet to be discovered. Mendeleev's table became a very popular tool for cataloging and understanding the elements. So popular, but scientists have used his techniques building and his table and refining it what we know as the modern periodic table. Today, of course, elements are listed in order of increasing atomic number, and other elements were also added after Mendeleev's death. But it's all based on his original idea placing elements together based on their properties. And as the time passes, more and more elements get included in the modern day periodic table. Currently, some artificial elements are also added in the periodic table. There are total 118 elements present in our modern day periodic table. And at last, I want to thank every one of you for watching my documentary. It was a brief history of modern day periodic table. Thank you.